June 15th, 2025. A date that will be remembered as a turning point in the Middle East, a region long defined by tension, suspicion, and unresolved conflict. The Middle East stands on the brink as Iran and Israel edge closer to direct war than ever before. The world holds its breath, watching as two regional powers, each with deep-rooted fears and ambitions, prepare for a confrontation that could reshape the entire region. Decades of shadow conflict, proxies, sabotage, and threats have erupted into open confrontation, threatening to engulf the region. What was once fought in the shadows is now playing out in the open, with the stakes higher than ever. The world watches anxiously. Decisions in Tehran, Jerusalem, and Washington could reshape global geopolitics for years. Every move is scrutinized, every statement analyzed, as leaders weigh the risks of escalation against the hope for restraint. Tensions soared after the 2023 Gaza war, failed nuclear talks, and a defiant response to a UN resolution condemning Iran's nuclear advances. Each event has added fuel to a fire that now threatens to burn out of control. US embassies are on high alert, bracing for the possibility of attacks or unrest as the situation deteriorates. Families of American personnel are evacuating, leaving behind uncertainty and fear for those who remain. The sense of crisis is palpable, echoing through airports and embassy corridors. And the threat of an Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear sites is real. Military assets are mobilized, and the world wonders if the next move will ignite a wider war. This story unpacks how former allies became bitter enemies, tracing the dramatic shifts in alliances and enmities that have defined the last half-century. The central role of Iran's nuclear ambitions and the fears they inspire in Israel and beyond lies at the heart of this crisis. Recent escalations, military build-ups, missile launches, and economic shocks are pushing both sides to the edge. The US role, global economic risks, and the possibility of a wider conflict are all in play. Possible outcomes, war or fragile peace, hang in the balance. The choices made now will echo for generations, shaping the fate of millions. A war here would not be contained. Energy supplies, refugee flows, and humanitarian crises would ripple far beyond the region's borders. World markets would all be shaken, with economic shocks felt from New York to Tokyo, and ordinary people everywhere facing the consequences. Understanding this crisis is essential for anyone who wants to grasp the fragility of our interconnected world and the urgent need for diplomacy, vigilance, and hope in the face of uncertainty. Once Iran and Israel were partners, non-Arab powers united by shared interests before 1979. The Iranian Revolution shattered that alliance, replacing the pro-Western Shah with Ayatollah Khomeini's anti-Israel, anti-Western regime. Iran's new leadership branded Israel an illegitimate outpost of American imperialism, handing its embassy to the PLO in a symbolic break. Over time, Iran built the axis of resistance, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others, arming and funding groups on Israel's borders. Israel responded with covert operations, sabotage, and targeted assassinations, while Iran orchestrated attacks on Israeli and Jewish targets worldwide. This tit-for-tat shadow war deepened mistrust, turning a political dispute into an existential ideological struggle. Today's standoff is the product of decades of escalating rivalry and hardened enmity. At the heart of the crisis is Iran's nuclear program, Israel's ultimate red line. Israel itself, a presumed nuclear power, vows to prevent Iran from acquiring the bomb, fearing a regional arms race and emboldened Iranian proxies. Iran insists its program is peaceful, but secrecy and defiance have fueled global suspicion. The 2015 nuclear deal briefly curbed Iran's ambitions, but the US withdrawal in 2018 and renewed sanctions led Iran to ramp up enrichment. Now Iran is closer than ever to breakout, enough material for a bomb, while defying international inspectors. Israel's leaders believe time is running out. Only military action, they argue, can stop a nuclear-armed Iran. The world faces a dangerous countdown. The 2023 Gaza war ignited a new and dangerous phase in the long-simmering Iran-Israel conflict, transforming what had been a shadowy struggle into a direct and highly visible confrontation. Iran's support for Hamas and Hezbollah opened up multiple fronts against Israel. Daily rocket and drone attacks from Lebanon forced tens of thousands of Israeli civilians to evacuate their homes, creating a sense of constant threat and instability along the northern border. The scale and frequency of these attacks were unprecedented, stretching Israel's defenses thin and raising fears of a wider regional war. The shadow war between Iran and Israel turned overt and unmistakable. After an Israeli airstrike killed senior Iranian commanders in Syria, Iran responded with a massive barrage, over 300 drones and missiles launched directly at Israel. This marked the first time Iran had attacked Israel from its own territory, crossing a line that had previously held for decades. US, British and Jordanian forces joined Israel in intercepting most of the incoming projectiles, showcasing a rare moment of international military cooperation. Yet, despite the successful defense, the taboo of direct strikes between Iran and Israel was shattered, signaling a new era of open hostilities. In retaliation, Israel struck back, targeting Iranian air defenses near a sensitive nuclear site. This bold move set a new precedent for open confrontation, raising the stakes and increasing the risk of escalation between the two regional powers. For Iran, the conflict validated its multi-front strategy, demonstrating its ability to pressure Israel on several borders. For Israel, the attacks confirmed Iran's growing aggression and reinforced the belief that only decisive action could ensure its security. Prime Minister Netanyahu now sees a fleeting but critical strategic window to strike at Iran's nuclear program, believing that the current crisis may justify unprecedented military action. The fires raging in Gaza have not only devastated the region, but have also brought both Iran and Israel to the very brink of a much larger and more dangerous conflict. Amid rising tensions, fragile diplomacy continues in Oman, perhaps the last hope for peace. US and Iranian negotiators face a vast gulf. Washington demands an end to enrichment, using the threat of Israeli action as leverage. Iran insists on its right to peaceful nuclear activity and immediate sanctions relief. The latest IEA censure has hardened Iran's stance, while Supreme Leader Khamenei has rejected US proposals. Some see the talks as a diplomatic cover for looming military action. Others hope the threat of war will force compromise. The world's eyes are on Oman, where the fate of the region may be decided. Success could mean de-escalation. Failure could trigger catastrophe. The clock is ticking. The US walks a tightrope, supporting Israel's security while trying to avoid another Middle East war. President Trump warns of possible conflict but prefers diplomacy, reflecting deep divisions in Washington. The US won't join an Israeli strike, but promises intelligence and defensive aid if Iran retaliates. Embassy evacuations highlight real fears of American targets in a wider war. America's leverage is immense. Its signals to Israel and Iran could tip the balance toward war or peace. Netanyahu lobbies for more support, seeing a weakened Iran as a rare opportunity. The world watches Washington, knowing its choices are pivotal. Economic warfare is the crisis's hidden front. US maximum pressure sanctions have crippled Iran's economy, slashing oil exports and fueling hardship. Iran's top demand in talks, sanctions relief, vital for regime survival. The Strait of Hormuz, a choke point for global oil, is at risk. Iran has threatened to disrupt it if attacked or further sanctioned. Even the threat of war spikes oil prices. Actual conflict could trigger a global recession. Attacks on tankers or Gulf infrastructure would send shockwaves through energy markets and consumer prices worldwide. That's why Europe and Asia are desperate for peace. The world economy hangs in the balance. The economic battlefield is as critical as the military one. The world faces three stark scenarios, each with the potential to reshape the Middle East and reverberate far beyond its borders. First, an imminent Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear sites, the goal to set back Iran's nuclear ambitions. But such an attack would almost certainly trigger massive retaliation, not just from Iran, but from its network of regional proxies. The result could be a devastating multi-front war, drawing in neighboring countries and threatening global energy supplies. Without access to advanced US bunker-buster bombs, Israel may be unable to destroy Iran's most deeply buried facilities. A failed strike could embolden Tehran, making Iran more determined than ever to pursue nuclear weapons and fueling a dangerous arms race in the region. In response, Iran would likely unleash a barrage of missiles and mobilize its proxies, plunging the region into chaos and putting millions of civilians at risk. Second, a last-minute diplomatic breakthrough in Oman. Negotiators could reach a limited deal, freezing Iran's most sensitive nuclear activities in exchange for partial sanctions relief. This fragile compromise would offer a temporary pause, easing tensions and opening the door for further talks. Such an agreement would buy precious time and de-escalate the immediate crisis. But it would not resolve the core dispute over Iran's nuclear ambitions or Israel's security concerns. Third, a tense limbo with no war but no peace. Both sides remain on high alert, and the threat of conflict lingers in the air. In this shadow war, covert operations, cyber attacks and nuclear advances continue. The risk of miscalculation or accidental escalation remains dangerously high, keeping the entire region on edge. Each path carries grave risks and uncertain consequences. The region teeters on a knife's edge, with the world watching anxiously. The decisions made in the coming days will shape not only the future of the Middle East, but also the stability and security of the world for years to come. The Iran-Israel crisis may seem far away, but its impact is global. War would mean humanitarian disaster, soaring energy prices, and new refugee waves, felt from the Middle East to Europe and beyond. It threatens the international system of rules, especially nuclear non-proliferation. An Iranian bomb could spark a regional arms race. An Israeli strike could set a precedent for preemptive war. The stakes are not just regional. They're about global security, economic stability, and the future of international law. This standoff is a lesson in the dangers of unresolved history and the urgent need for diplomacy. We are all stakeholders in the outcome. Understanding this crisis is not optional, it's essential for our